Meet Julian and Maya. They're twins, both 34 years old, and 6 months ago, they lost their father. Along with the grief came something neither of them expected to think about so soon: an inheritance. Split evenly, each of them receives $100,000. Same amount, same day, same bank. From that point on, everything else is different. Julian has spent his adult life dreaming about running something of his own. He's worked in restaurants since he was 19, first as a dishwasher, eventually as a manager, always watching how the business side worked, always thinking, I could do this better. Maya has a completely different relationship with money. She works a steady job in logistics. She's never wanted to be her own boss, and the idea of running a business sounds less like freedom and more like a second job with worse hours and no guaranteed paycheck. So they make two very different decisions, with the exact same amount of money. Julian uses his $100,000 to buy a small existing sandwich shop in a decent part of town, one with steady foot traffic and an owner ready to retire. Maya takes her $100,000 and puts nearly all of it into a total stock market index fund, then goes back to her normal life. For the next 15 years, we're going to follow both of these paths, every good month and every terrible one. Every dollar Julian pulls out of the business, and every dollar Maya never touches. Then we'll see where two people who started with identical inheritances actually ended up. Let's begin. Julian's purchase isn't just $100,000 for the shop itself. After negotiating, the shop costs $85,000, but he needs another $10,000 for new equipment and a small renovation. And roughly $5,000 disappears into legal fees, licensing, and the kind of paperwork nobody warns you about. By the time he unlocks the door on his first morning, as an owner, his entire inheritance is gone, converted into ovens, a walk-in fridge, a lease agreement, and a business license with his name on it. Maya's transition looks almost anticlimactic by comparison. She transfers $95,000 into a brokerage account, keeps $5,000 in savings just in case, and sets up her investment in a broad index fund. The whole process takes about 20 minutes. She closes her laptop, makes dinner, and doesn't think about it again for weeks. On day one, Julian looks like the twin who actually did something meaningful with his money. He has a physical shop, a sign with his name faintly implied in the branding, employees who call him boss, and the immediate tangible feeling of ownership. Maya has a number on a screen and absolutely nothing to show anyone. If you asked their friends who made the more impressive move, nobody would hesitate. But impressive and successful aren't always the same word. The first year is brutal for Julian, in the specific way that small business ownership is brutal for almost everyone who tries it. Revenue comes in, but so does everything else. Rent, payroll, ingredients, insurance, a walk-in fridge that decides to stop walking in its second month. He works 60-hour weeks, learns how to fire someone for the first time, and discovers that owning a sandwich shop mostly means being the person responsible for every single thing that could possibly go wrong, all at once, usually before 7 a.m. By the end of year one, Julian's shop has brought in about $310,000 in revenue. After ingredients, payroll, rent, utilities, and the fridge incident, he's left with roughly $28,000 in profit. And he pays himself a modest $24,000 of that, leaving the rest in the business as a cushion. It's not nothing, but after 60-hour weeks for 12 straight months, it doesn't feel like much either. Maya's first year requires no 60-hour weeks and no fridge incidents. Her $95,000, assuming the market delivers something close to its long-term average of around 10% annually, has grown to roughly $104,000. She hasn't fired anyone. She hasn't been called at 6 a.m. about a broken walk-in. She's simply gone to her regular job and let the number quietly climb in the background. 3 years pass. Julian's shop has found its rhythm. Regulars know his name. He's hired a manager to cover mornings, so he can occasionally sleep past 6 a.m. Revenue has grown to around $360,000 annually, and after all expenses, the business nets about $52,000 a year in profit. Julian pays himself $40,000 and reinvests the rest into the shop: a new espresso machine, a second cash register, a small patio expansion. Over 3 years, he's paid himself roughly $108,000 total, and the business itself, including its equipment, lease position, and growing customer base, is now conservatively worth around $140,000, more than what he originally paid for it. Maya's portfolio, meanwhile, has continued compounding without a single decision required. Her original $95,000 has grown to approximately $126,000. She hasn't added a single additional dollar. She hasn't needed to. The market has simply done what markets tend to do over long periods, slowly and unglamorously increase. So after 3 years, Julian has personally taken home about $108,000 in salary and owns a business worth roughly $140,000 for a combined position of around $248,000. Maya's portfolio sits at $126,000. Julian is clearly ahead, and it makes sense. He's been working 60-hour weeks. Maya has been doing nothing but waiting. But here's what the early numbers don't show. Julian's $248,000 isn't liquid the way Maya's $126,000 is. Most of his wealth is trapped inside a business that requires him to show up every single day to keep functioning. If Julian gets sick for a month, revenue doesn't pause politely and wait for him. If he wants to sell the shop tomorrow, finding a buyer willing to pay full value takes time, negotiation, and often a lower price than the number on paper suggests. Maya could sell her entire portfolio by Thursday afternoon with a few clicks. Year 5 brings Julian his first real crisis. A new competitor opens 2 blocks away, backed by a regional chain with better marketing and lower prices on the exact sandwiches Julian built his reputation on. Revenue drops nearly 15% over 6 months. Julian cuts his own pay to $30,000 that year just to keep 2 employees on staff. He spends evenings redesigning the menu, cutting costs, negotiating better prices with suppliers, doing everything he can to protect something he built with his bare hands and his entire inheritance. Maya's 5th year involves no competitors opening 2 blocks from her portfolio. Investment, still compounding at roughly 10% annually, has grown to approximately $153,000. She doesn't know there's a sandwich price war happening across town, and even if she did, it wouldn't affect her at all. This is the concentration risk nobody talks about when someone dreams about owning a business. Julian's entire financial future is tied to one location, one neighborhood, one industry, one set of competitors he has zero control over. By year 7, Julian has fought his way back. He's added catering for local offices, which turns out to be more profitable than walk-in traffic ever was. Revenue climbs back to around $400,000 annually, with profit around $58,000. Over the year 7 period, Julian has paid himself a cumulative total of roughly $195,000 since opening. And the business, now with a proven track record and a diversified revenue stream, is conservatively valued around $175,000. Maya's portfolio, having weathered the same 7 years of market ups and downs without a single phone call from an angry customer or a temperamental competitor, has grown to approximately $185,000. At the 7-year mark, Julian's combined position, salary taken plus business value, sits at roughly $370,000. Maya sits at $185,000. Julian is significantly ahead. If we stop the story here, the business would look like the obvious winner. And in terms of pure numbers, it currently is. But businesses don't run on autopilot, and neither do sandwich shops. Year 9 brings a lease renewal, and Julian's landlord, noticing how successful the shop has become, raises the rent by 40%. Julian has no leverage here. He can't take his walk-in fridge and his loyal customer base and simply relocate without losing a meaningful chunk of both. He absorbs the increase, which quietly eats nearly $18,000 a year out of what used to be profit. Maya experiences no landlord in year 9. Nobody raises her rent. Her portfolio simply continues, now worth approximately $234,000, still without a single additional contribution beyond that original inheritance. Year 10 arrives, and this is where the 2 paths start to reveal something important. Julian's cumulative take-home pay since opening the shop now totals roughly $255,000. The business itself, accounting for the rent increase and the slightly thinner margins that came with it, is now valued around $190,000. Combined, Julian's position sits at approximately $445,000. It's an enormous accomplishment, built through a decade of early mornings, hard decisions, and genuine risk. Maya's portfolio, having compounded for a full decade without requiring a single hour of her time, has grown to approximately $246,000. She's now solidly behind Julian in total dollars, but she's also spent 0 hours managing a walk-in fridge, negotiating a lease, or lying awake wondering if a competitor 2 blocks away is about to put her out of business. Years 11 through 13 brings something Julian didn't fully anticipate: exhaustion. Running a business for over a decade takes a physical and mental toll that a brokerage account never will. He hires a full-time manager to take over daily operations, which improves his quality of life, but also reduces his personal take-home pay to around $28,000 a year, since the manager's salary comes directly out of what used to be Julian's. The business itself continues generating steady profit, and its total value climbs to around $215,000 by year 13. But Julian's own cumulative earnings from the shop over those 3 additional years amount to only about $84,000. Maya's portfolio during this same period continues its quiet, uneventful climb, reaching approximately $310,000 by year 13. No exhaustion, no manager to hire, no decisions to make about whether she's finally ready to hand over daily control of something she built from nothing. Now we reach year 15, the end of our comparison. Julian's cumulative take-home pay across 15 years of ownership totals approximately $360,000.